All the President's Men, 1976. It's a political thriller directed by Alan Pakula, starring Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford. If I could pick any quote to pretty much summarize this movie, it would be this one by Ben Bradley. You know what the results of the last Gallup poll? Half the country never even heard of the word Watergate. Nobody gives a shit. You guys are probably pretty tired, right? Well, you should be. Go on home, get a nice hot bath, rest up 15 minutes, then get your asses back in gear. We're under a lot of pressure, and you put us here. Nothing's riding on this except the First Amendment to the Constitution, freedom of the press, and maybe the future of the country. Not that any of that matters, but if you guys fuck up again, I'm gonna get mad. Good night. Nowadays, pretty much anybody who's made it through high school knows about Watergate and knows Nixon's involvement. But who are the ones that brought this story to us, and how do we know about it? Well, the answer to that question would be Woodward and Bernstein, seen on the bottom right here, who intuitively pick up on the suspicious parts of five men who broke into the DNC headquarters on June 17, 1972. And Woodward attends a court hearing of the case with those five men, and he kind of suspects that there's something fishy going on because they got a pretty high-profile legal counsel for what was perceived to be petty burglary. And so Woodward and Bernstein team up to compile what would be arguably the most significant news story ever published and one of the press's greatest victories of the 20th century. Now, the Nixon administration was pretty notorious for silencing just about anything that threatened their mission. On the top of that blacklist was any press that spoke badly of the administration, mainly the Washington Post and New York Times. In many scenes, we as viewers realize that the reporters are being closely surveilled, a clear violation of freedom of the press. And it's kind of neat that the director here films many scenes from above, kind of an aerial view, and from long distances, just letting us know that they're being watched, and we can kind of feel that. And known cooperation with the press was a near certain way to end a career, if not worse. But the few who did give information to Bernstein and Woodward, they provided pretty significant breakthroughs in the case. Pretty much anybody who gave them information led to, if not one, then two or three more sources. In a conspiracy like this, you build from the outer edges and go step by step. If you shoot too high and miss, everybody feels more secure. That's a quote from Deep Throat, one of the most notorious whistleblowers in this case. Cooperating to piece together a major story like this has a ton of challenges, and we saw that throughout the film. Sources feel for their lives, wanting to remain anonymous. Allegations so serious have to be thoroughly founded before they're published, or else all trust is lost. And the scope of connectedness is so wide and protected that there is no real threshold that must be passed in order to publish. I mean, we even see FBI and CIA involved with this. And if they can't publish names, then they're seriously scavenging for credibility. So the dilemma for much of the movie becomes, at what point does the risk of publishing the story become worth it? Now, the press is a whole lot more wise with their words and their timing than the Nixon administration. And Ben Bradley, who was the executive editor, he ran a very calculated operation. He only struck on the story when it was mature enough to be published. So what is All the President's Men? Well, even though it follows politics from the outside, almost from an adversarial perspective, it is a political film. It's about exposing the threats to democracy that were caused by the Nixon administration. It's a battle to preserve and defend the First Amendment of the Constitution, which, ironically, is the very task that the president should be aiming to do. But in the Nixon era, accountability only came from the press and whistleblowers courageously working together to bring down the tyrannical state. In many instances, Nixon kind of acted as the entire state. These were admirable journalists, and the film definitely portrayed them as so. Motivated by the significance of the truth, Bernstein and Woodward, they worked tirelessly to make and exploit honest connections, all while keeping their sources safe and anonymous. In this film, there's no question that the press is the hero and Nixon and his secret network are the villains. The American public already kind of felt this sentiment by the time the movie was released. Now, All the President's Men is regarded as one of the greatest political movies of all time, both from a storytelling perspective and a cinematic perspective. The dioptic approach to the film lets the viewer decide for themselves what's important in each scene, almost as if we're the third journalist assigned to the case. That's really interesting. The camera panning almost never seems to focus on one particular thing, so the viewer really does have to decide for themselves what they're going to look at and what they find important. The casting and the cinematography are among the best of the 1970s, having won a number of Oscars and many other awards. Particularly Jason Robards, who plays Ben Bradley. He won multiple awards for Best Supporting Actor. Now, Ben Bradley was also played by Tom Hanks in The Post, which was released in 2017. And he's regarded as a hero in the field of journalism for going up against President Nixon and exposing the truth to the American public. And I would say it's not ironic that the opening scenes from this film are a nearly seamless transition from The Post. Now, if anybody has any interest in, the Watergate scandal, both of these movies play very well off each other. So what do I mean when I say that this film was shot with a dioptic approach? Well, I mean that the main subject is in focus, as is the background. Our eyes are really drawn to the subject by the power of the scene, while also leaving the background open to interpretation. It goes for like a hyper-realism approach. I mean, we really feel like we're in the newsroom the whole time, which is quite a unique way to shoot a movie. This is a very raw and powerful historical story, and my personal favorite part of this, and I was thinking it the whole time I was watching it, is how well it ages. And if nothing else, it's super thrilling to watch. Now, the one critique I do have for the movie is that the ending does feel pretty abrupt to the modern viewer. But we gotta keep in mind that at the time of the release, 1976, there was no real need to draw out what happened after the story was released. We already knew all the conclusions to the scandals, and we already knew that Nixon had resigned. And this film definitely reinforces the message that the truth seekers of our society, their duty is to expose the secretive if we want to keep our democracy. Now, although the film wasn't directed, in any way to address modern politics, the attack on the press definitely remains a relevant issue today, especially under the Trump administration, and we'll see how that recovers under the Biden administration. Nearly every presidential administration since then and before then has had some degree of scandal. And the big difference is always how the press is handled and how the press handles a scandal. More often than not, respect will go both ways in that regard. But let it be known, if there is secrecy, they will find out about it. No matter how respectful, they're always looking for that story.